Good morning, and thank you to ArcVic for inviting me to share my experience of raising a child who lives with anxiety. My husband and I are parents of 3 adult children. Our youngest son, Liam, now 19, has experienced anxiety since around the age of 4. I have Liam's consent to tell his story to you today. In order to contextualise what we perceived to be the development of Liam's anxiety, I feel it is relevant to provide you with a small picture of Liam's preceding health difficulties. At the age of 6 months, Liam had a nasty fall to concrete, resulting in a fractured skull and brain trauma but not bleeding. Subsequent to this incident, Liam developed seizures for which he was medicated. At age 3, he was diagnosed with verbal dyspraxia, a neurological development condition that hinders the ability to form the mouth movements that are required to make speech sounds. Therefore, during his junior years and until intensive speech therapy took effect, Liam communicated using only laminated cards to help us understand his needs. At around age 4, we began to notice behavioural issues, which were vastly in contrast with that which we were familiar as the parents of 2 other young children. As young parents with no knowledge of childhood anxieties, we worried about his apparent frustrations and difficulties in managing his emotions. I associated his regular emotional meltdowns with the effect of the anti-seizure medication on his sleep and his frustrations on his encumbered speech and incapacity to have us understand him. The commencement of school brought with it a special set of difficulties for this anxious young man. During the early years, he remained frustrated, restless, nervous, and displayed obsessive and excessive traits of perfectionism. He collected and kept everything. Wrappers and empty food containers were taken from the bins and packed away in his bedroom along with all of our remote controls. He was painstakingly fastidious and extremely particular that things be done in a certain way. Any degree of change to his usual routine saw him frightened and angry, and he consistently needed reassurance. He also took on childhood projects with excessive enthusiasm. Following the advice of his earliest educators, we had Liam tested for autism, Asperger's syndrome and learning difficulties. This led us to naturopaths, chiropractors and food allergists. I felt I was undertaking a medical degree through the revolving door of general practitioners, paediatric and neurological specialists, blood tests, CT scans, MRIs, psychologists and behavioural therapists. Many of these tests were undertaken in order to discover further implications of the early head trauma. Therefore, it is understandable that no one uncovered Liam's relentless anxiety. Liam also struggled physically as he failed to thrive. The first 8 years of his school life saw him as the smallest child among his peers. He had a propensity to break bones, elbow, arm, ankle and dislocated knees. In secondary school, we watched him withdraw from social, sporting, class and school activities and become highly anxious at the prospect of any activity that might draw attention to him. I recall taking him to the Vic Market, where he refused to get out of the car until a queue of school-aged children waiting for a bus had boarded and left. A similar incident occurred in the supermarket when he dashed to the next aisle as there were 2 school children with their mother in ours. He was so worried that others were noticing him and talking about him. For this reason, he often retreated from the classroom, reporting feeling sick or having a bad headache. Headaches plagued him. He was shy and scared. His coping mechanism for this social anxiety was to avoid socialising with his peers during recesses, opting for the solitude of the library or computer room. This self-alienation then triggered a belief in him that he was actually not welcomed in his social group. He was sure they did not like him, nor did they want his company. During secondary school, he often told me how lonely he was. Liam's sleep was also badly interrupted with regular 2 a.m. episodes of worry, which often escalated into panic. This panic was usually related to the battle in his mind over the need to return to school the following day to get his work done and the prospect of facing another day. During these nights he would say to me, "Mum, when will this stop? I can't do this anymore. I can't cope with this." It felt to me that this nighttime torment would never stop. My greatest fears were realised when his despair had him tell me that he didn't want to be here anymore. I recall hearing him from his room one morning at 7:30. I found him curled up on his floor in his school uniform, crying and saying to me, "Mum, I just can't do today, I can't." Every morning saw him struggle emotionally and physically to get himself to school. He put enormous pressure on himself as well to arrive and not look different. Rather, he was determined to appear like the other boys and to fit in, yet he was so fatigued. Many days he slept sleeping in the school counsellor's room. We were all tired in our house, and I was in awe of his courage in keeping on going. He was so young, he was so drained and full of worry. His internal resources were spent, and he could easily have given up. I think others might have. My worry too was overwhelming, and my heart broke as happiness remained elusive. His happiness. As parents, we would die for the happiness of our children. I was tormented with questions: what do I do now when I have tried everything? Who can help us, and how can I help him? But what I learnt was there was actually nothing I could do, possibly because I'd done everything. In fact, I realised that doing nothing became the most helpful. During those 10 a.m. episodes of anguish, I learned to just be with Liam, to just sit and say nothing and hold him if he wished. This was akin to acceptance of what was happening, not fighting or to trying to stop it, rather just being with it and waiting. It will go. We started to call these mornings of despair mental health days. We cancelled school and all other events and just stayed in his pyjamas all day if necessary, doing whatever it was he felt he needed to do for himself. We removed all the stresses and the must-dos and waited until tomorrow to see how that day felt. When Liam was panicked that he must get his schoolwork done, even though he was feeling so unwell, I negotiated with his educators a vastly lessened school load that could be achieved when he was able. There seemed no point in expecting him to perform at school with levels of anxiety that rendered him powerless and vulnerable. He could go back and get an education another time. We learned to sit in acceptance. Finally, one day when Liam was not quite 12, I received a call from the school counsellor. She explained that Liam was in her office, huddled under the closed curtain window. He was distressed and refusing to talk to her. She explained to me that the school no longer knew what they could do for him and that we needed to explore other interventions. She suggested a child psychiatrist. This was the beginning of Liam's wellness. That day I collected him and took him again to our GP, who referred us to a child psychiatrist who agreed to see us in the next 2 hours. Liam sat in her room, shedding tears, clutched hands, head bowed, too troubled to speak or to answer her questions. He was exhausted. He had also explained to me of his doubts of yet another specialist being able to help him. I felt he was losing hope. She spent 45 minutes with us that day, at which point she said to us what I will never forget. Liam is the saddest little boy I've ever seen. He has clinical depression, and while I spend 80% of my practice hours removing children from their medications, he needs medication immediately. One explanation she offered for her diagnosis was many years of undiagnosed and hence mismanaged anxiety. She explained to me that if we don't manage anxiety, sometimes it results in depression. It may sound strange for you to hear this, that this was the very best day for us in a long time. Finally, we might have an answer and a way to provide him some relief. While of course we would have preferred for our child never to have endured these childhood hardships, there are certainly things that we have learned about life, about ourselves, which we may never have should the circumstances have been different. We learned to adjust to how we lived in our world, a world where we had tried to meet the usual expectations of other families in our social structure and maintain customary routines that others undertook. We learned to adapt. We learned to turn adversities into opportunities, and we found new ways to live flexibly. Understandably, Liam's brother and sister struggled to understand what they saw as favouritism by me for their little brother. Their spoilt youngest brother, who didn't have to go to school if he didn't want to, and who got to spend so much time with their mum. They too had to find ways to manage these emotions. Our marriage also met, certainly, with opportunities for adjustment. We all had to adjust. As parents, it seems that we must feel guilty at all times about something. In fact, is this not compulsory? This was no different from me. I recall an interpersonal battle with the guilt I felt over holding such concerns for our son when others were far worse off. Therefore, I ensured that I appeared outwardly okay. I refused to appear not to be managing. Don't worry about me. Look after those who are enduring real health issues with their children. Ours is nothing by comparison. During these difficult years, however, I was truly blessed to have the comfort and support of my family and amazing friends. One of whom is here today, Lou. Thank you. and of course my ever so calm and capable husband, who picked up the duties required for the care of our other children. He too is here today. Thank you, my darling. These were people who provided me a safe and supportive environment where I permitted myself to be vulnerable. Today Liam is well and 19. He completed Year 12 last year and achieved a pass on his VCE certificate. He decided not to pursue further studies at this stage and has undertaken part-time work in the hospitality industry. He remains on antidepressant medication that keeps at bay the soul-destroying episodes of depression and sadness while providing emotional breathing space in which to learn how to manage his anxieties. Occasionally, days of flatness and sadness revisit him. These are the days I notice him looking pale and reluctant to communicate. He just takes himself off and has his mental health day. He remains sometimes uncertain about his world and is often fearful that perhaps he is doing or has done the wrong thing. He still needs reassurance. If another parent ever reported bad behaviour, I always responded, oh yeah, that'll be Liam's bigger brother, definitely not Liam. Liam's brother and sister now sit in a lovely place of understanding him, and while they both live away from the family home now, they maintain a close connection with him. They look out for and include him in many of their social activities. He now sleeps. He has friendship groups within which he feels comfortable and safe, but more importantly, he's mostly happy. I believe that through his adversities and hardships, Liam has developed an inner strength that I would not attribute to others of his tender age. He has grown into a most beautiful, sensitive and caring young man. His empathy for others is observable and unusual. I put this down to all the therapy he's had. He has a quirky sense of humour, which in recent times I just call weird. I often say to him, you are the loveliest person I know, Liam, and he really is. The irony is not missed on me that perhaps I became Liam's proxy wounded healer. In 2010, I entered tertiary my first degree, a Bachelor of Counselling, and I now run my own practice working with parents, women and troubled youth. In 2011, I joined the beautiful ArcVic family as a volunteer on their phone support lines, and today I team lead on the helplines and co-facilitate one of their anxiety and OCD support groups. I feel very at home with the ArcVic family. I hope that telling you our story today might offer you a small understanding on the impact of anxiety for one young person. But more importantly, I hope to have offered you hope, an insight into the window of hope for change, recovery and greater well-being. While preparing this for you today was quite an emotional roller coaster for me, it was also cathartic, as it offered me an opportunity to once again experience that window of hope. I thank you very much for listening.